All right, everyone. Welcome to the SEO session. Thank you to our gold sponsor, which is Watchful. I'd like to introduce our speaker today, Yannick Gaultier. Am I saying that correctly?
Just fine.
He initially trained as a mechanical engineer and spent 20 years in the non-IT industry. Then he started developing some open source web projects, mostly centered around SEO, including several Joomla extensions. It was a hobby in 2006, but 3 years later and to this day, it has become his full-time job. He runs Weebler, a small company handling development and support for our open source CMS plugin. His main Joomla extensions are SH404 SEF, the Veteran SEO extension, and WP AMP, the first AMP plugin for Joomla. And a large part of his day is spent tracking every bit of SEO and marketing information available, experimenting with it, and deciding if it should make it into our extensions or not. Today, he is presenting on what's up in SEO for 2021 and how to improve SEO engineering for our small to medium websites, given multifaceted changing nature of SEO. All right, add your questions to the chat and I will be back on for questions at the end. Take it away.
Hi there. Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. I'm going to, so like Robin said, thank you very much for the introduction. I'm going to switch right now to the presentation, and we'll be turning on closed captioning. I hope this is going to be working fine. It's my first real life experience with closed captioning, so don't hesitate to tell me if it's working or not in the chat. This is going to be about SEO and SEO in 2021. There are a few new things happening this year, aside, hopefully, all of us getting allowed to travel again and meeting each other. Let me say a few more words about what I do. Like Robin said, I'm running Weebler.com. We've been doing professional extensions only dedicated to SEO and content for a number of years. And the most well-known extension we've been doing is SH404 most likely. I just wanted to shamelessly plug that we released yesterday a beta version of our latest extension, which is for SEO. It's a brand new SEO extension running on Joomla 3 and Joomla 4. And if you care to know about it, head to our booth and we can talk about that. I also want to mention, if you're into SEO, that we are also the developer of a free Chrome and Firefox and Edge extension. It's called SEO Info, and it's providing you with lots of information and validation against the page that you are currently viewing into your browser. So it's a really useful tool that we developed for ourselves and that we have released for all to use. Okay, let's get started. What's up? There are 3 things I wanted to talk to you that are happening this year: mobile first index, the page experience by Google, and third-party cookies. Let's jump in. Mobile first indexing is not really a new thing. What's happening this year is that it's going to be happening for absolutely everybody. So sometimes this year, April, May, June, we don't know exactly, but because they have been postponing it, but Google is going to analyze the content of your website only based on the mobile version of it. They've been doing that for a while, for probably a couple of years already, but for only a subset of all websites. Now it's from right now, it's going to be for each and every site. And there's a consequence to that. It's that if something is not on your mobile, on the mobile version of your site, then basically for search engines, it does not exist, at least for Google. I'm pretty sure you've got a very nice mobile site with a very responsive version, but a recent study by a company called iPoolRank showed that among a large number of URLs, random technically from the web, only like a third of them serve the same number of, sorry, about a third of them serve a different number of links on the same page, and only a bit more than 15% serve the same number of words on the mobile and desktop versions of your site. So you might be hit by that. That's something you want to look at. So these people have developed a tool called Pareto, and you can use it to test your website, and that tool will crawl the site, or test pages rather, and that will tell you whether you have different content on mobile and on the desktop version. And if you have, then you need to do something about it, because the content that only exists on your desktop is not going to be considered by search engines. So you have to look into that. By the way, throughout the talk, you'll see links like this one, weblog.com/SEO/a number. And these are shortcuts to pages that that I'm talking about here. Like, so if you want to go to the Pareto testing tool, just follow that link, SEO/48, and it will take you there. So that's the first thing, mobile first indexing. The next big thing, and you probably heard about that one, is something done by Google, and it's called the page experience. It's happening. It was supposed to be happening, or to have happened already, but they have postponed it again to around June. And that's a new way to measure performance. So it's not anything new in itself, but what's new is how they are measuring performance and taking it into account when ranking pages. The big difference here is that before that, they were using their crawler to measure the speed of your site. Now, from June and on, they'll be using actual users. Believe it or not, there are people that signed up for letting Chrome, when they're using Chrome to browse the web, they signed up so that their instance of Chrome is sending information. The slides are not good. I'm afraid there's not much I can do here. Anyway, I hope the audio is good. Yeah, so let's keep going. So they are going to use the actual data these people are sending to Google when they browse the web through Chrome, and they signed up for that. So that's a very big difference, because when someone is loading your site from, let's say, a very slow network on a 3G network somewhere, then it's going to be taken into account. And that's not something you can do, but you can do anything about. But that's something you can work on your site to improve. We'll get to that a little bit later. So why do people talk about it? Because it's an SEO ranking factor. And why I think it's not as important as you have heard or you may think, it's because performance was already a factor in ranking factor. And the other thing, the other reason it's not as important is because this is not a very important factor in ranking. Like, this is taken from the Google FAQ on the topic, and which URL you'll find here. And what they say is the page experience, the performance factor, is only going to matter when, as a tiebreaker, when you have multiple pages which are about the same with the same value. If one is faster than the other, basically, then it will go ahead. So that's still an important factor, especially if you're in a sorry, and in a competitive environment, in a competitive market. Very quickly, how does it work? It works by measuring three numbers: LCP, FID, CLS. LCP roughly measures how fast your site is loading from the time someone requests a page and the time your server responds, and the response is loaded into the browser and start to draw on the screen. You can do a lot of things about that number. The FID is measuring how fast your site is responding to user input. There is no point in having a button or a link being displayed very quickly if it doesn't react when I click on it. So that's another factor. And the last one, CLS, here measures how visually stable your site is. I'm sure you've all experienced the what happens when a page has loaded and you start reading an article on a newspaper, and then all of a sudden an ad comes up and shifts the entire page, and what you were reading now is below, and you lost your track in where you are. So that's how that is becoming an important factor here. Now, what do you want to do about it? Have linked here two articles on the matter, how to optimize the CLS, and how, a more detailed article about core web vitals. My take on that is that if your site loads in 10 seconds or something like that, it's bad already. So do something about it. But you probably already know that you have to do something about it. Then if your site appears to you to load decently quickly, like in 2 or 3 seconds, then still go to the Google Search Console and look at the page experience report. This is going to tell you how real users, are viewing what's their experience is with your site. So that's what matters, and that's what they are going to take into account. This report links to PageSpeed Insight, which you might know, and is a tool by Google which will gives you insight by name about what's wrong with your speed, or what's good. Everything. After all, not everything is broken on the web, and what you can improve. So use that. And as a quick tip, the first thing you can do, and that will definitely help with CLS, with the layout shift that may happen when your site is loading, is to set width and height on all your images. Do that, even if your images are responsive and you're doing something else, because the reason to do that is because the browsers, modern browsers, are going to use the width and height to calculate the aspect ratio of the image, and then they can use that to reserve the space for your image before it's actually loaded. So do that. It's quick, it's easy, and it helps for many, many things. So that was the second thing that's going to change this year. And the third thing is third-party cookies. So here we are a bit ahead of time, because that's going to happen in 2022, June 2022. But what's going to happen is that Chrome, and obviously all the other major browsers, are going to reject cookies that are not from the site that's being viewed. They are called third-party cookies. If your site is joomla.org and you have a cookie that's attached to a domain, googleanalytics.com, for instance, then today it's working, tomorrow it's not. It's going to be rejected. It's not going to be assigned to the visitors. From Chrome 9T, which has been already released, I think, you can test that. This is a feature that's already there, but you need to enable it. There's a feature flag for that. So you need to enable that feature, and you can see how your site is reacting. The goal here is to obviously preserve privacy. Tracking with third-party cookies is bad, and it needs to go. They have already come up with, Google has already come up with something that's supposed to replace third-party cookies tracking. It's called FLoC, Federated Learning of Court, I think. And the idea behind it is that instead of tracking individual users, visitors with cookies, then the browser is going to provide an ID, and a specific person is going to be put in a group. So you're going to be identified as people who love or are interested in Joomla, or in CMSs, or in shoes, or in running, whatever. And so the assumption here is that it's less privacy invasive to know which group you belong to, rather than knowing exactly who you are and what you like individually. It's taken a lot of hit from many people, because not many people like to be tracked. So this is just a test right now. We don't know what's going to happen and what will actually be implemented 2 years from now. But my point here is that beside privacy, it will have an impact on ads, and remarketing. So if your site depends on ads and remarketing, then you need to start looking into that already, because finding replacement solutions might not be that easy. Likewise, if your site rely on things like single sign-on and some fancy analytics tools, then you might want to look into it as well and check whether how these things are going to work moving forward. Again, there's no rush, but you probably want to start looking at things right now. So now this is SEO, and this is the new stuff for 2021. But this is SEO as well, and the more things change with SEO, the more they actually stay the same. I've been doing SEO or SEO-related extensions for 13 years now, and many things I learned right at the start 13 years ago are still valid today. So let's very quickly go through all of that. First thing I'd like to mention is if you're doing SEO, ads are not SEO, but still, if you look at those results taken from a random search a couple of days ago, if you want to be present in search results, then maybe ads are a good shortcut to be there. Not many people are going to identify the fact that these are ads rather than actual results. So, and maybe most people will actually don't care. So maybe just keep that in mind. Moving on, I'll be focusing only on technical SEO for your site. So the first thing that matters, of course, is content. How do you write for your site? And with the introduction of artificial intelligence in many areas of SEO, in search engines, how the search engine work, there's been a lot of push onto writing naturally. It used to be that you would simply stuff many keywords, research keywords, and stuff keywords throughout your content and try to add synonyms everywhere and all of that. Today, it's likely to be counterproductive. And you really want to start going back writing for your visitors in natural terms. Don't stuff synonyms if that's not something you would do if you were writing to your friends or writing something without trying to rank for SEO. Natural writing is key. And one of the reasons for that, or one of the reasons you should not bother that much about synonyms, for instance, or stuffing keywords, is that at least for Google, and Bing also is doing that, they use artificial intelligence now to understand the search request, what people are searching for. When you type something in Google, they try to understand your query with a lot of intelligence, artificial mostly. And so they are the ones trying to figure out what the request actually means and how they can relate that to context. And it's not something you can actually force them to do by adding lots of keywords and lots of synonyms. A quick tip here, a well-known one though, but I still remind you, most of the times it's often easier if you keep one topic per page, just one topic per page. Now, second thing that hasn't changed, links. And by that, I mean backlinks. People linking to your site. They are still a major part of any any search engine work and their ranking algorithm. So it's still probably the best way to rank and to rank fast. Of course, what matters here is not the number of links. What matters here is the quality of the links, the authority, the quality of the sites linking to you, and that's what matters. Getting people to link to your content is not something that I'm getting into, because it will be like 1 or 2 entire talks. Still, and it's mostly done actually outside of your site, but it's it's social network sharing, it's regular marketing and asking people to link to your content. Just beware that you definitely don't want to buy link, and you want to exchange link with people. because that will usually result in unnatural link pattern, and you'll get penalized for that, really penalized. It's not that you are not going to rank well, you're going to be kicked out of results. So just don't do that. Now, there's another type of links, and that's internal links inside your site, and those links are the ones that define your site structure and the navigation between items on your site are going to define what could be called silos or semantic areas. There's a lot of work that can be done there to help search engines understand your content, and that might help a lot. So it's something you want to learn about a bit and maybe implement, because it's really easy. Usually it's really easy to implement on your site. It works, it helps, it's something you might want to look in. Next up, structured data. That's really my pet peeve this year. It's something that really matters. Structured data is the fact that you can add some hidden tags to your content, to your pages, to describe what your content is and what it talks about and the details of it. It's really beneficial if it's well done. There's a format called JSON-LD that's preferred by Google, at least, and that's the easiest one to use, so I recommend using that. There are several extensions that can kind of do that automatically or semi-automatically. Most of the times you will have to work a bit on it to configure the extensions properly, but it's really worthwhile if you do it well. One tip here, you need to validate. You need to test the results of these, what your extension is adding to your page, because there is a very strict, there's a very strict, let's say, grammar or semantic to these structured data. They have to be valid. So there are online testers by Google and others, and you need to make sure a page is valid. Otherwise, you're just wasting your time, because if your structured data tags are not valid, then there won't be use at all. So you're just wasting your time, and that will be a shame, because it can be really useful. Another well-known tool is sitemaps. I'm talking here about XML sitemaps, which are submitted or can be submitted to search engines, and their role is to help search engines identify the important pages on the site, the one they should focus on, both for crawling and reading them and for ranking them. So the direct conclusion of that is that you need to include only the important pages in the sitemap, and you absolutely need to exclude from your sitemaps pages like content pages or login pages, all the tags pages and the duplicated, anything that's redirected to something else should not be in a sitemap. Any page that has a canonical going to another page should not be in the sitemap. It's just wasted bandwidth. It's just wasting the actual usage of a sitemap. One quick note, taken straight from the documentation, the Google documentation. You don't need any sitemap really if your site has less than 500 pages. It's just not worth it. They will read everything. It's fine. It's not obviously a hard number, but 500 pages, I think. The only time maybe when you want to use a sitemap, even if you have a small site, maybe 20 or so pages, is if you launch a brand new site. Then you can maybe use an external service or build a sitemap by hand or something like that and submit that. But even in that case, it's not really that useful. You're probably better off just going to the search console and declaring the existence of your website, giving it the homepage, and they are going to crawl it very, very, very quickly. However, it's really useful if you have a large site, really. I have to go much faster, I think. So page title, write naturally. Meta description is something that's not used for ranking. So you have to balance the time spent on it versus how much time you spend writing them, because recent studies have shown that only maybe 30 or to 40% of the time they are going to be displayed in actual search results. The meta description is only used here in search results. And like I said, it's actually not used that often. So it can be useful to bring more people to you, but make sure you don't spend too much time on that. Social networks. Here we are talking about discovering your content and getting links to it. So it can be really important, but only if you find the right network for you, because you can spend lots of time sharing content and writing posts on the wrong social network for your users, for your customers, and that's going to be wasted. If you're working with social networks and want your content to be shared, what matters is adding OGP, what's called OGP tag, Open Graph Protocol tags. There are tags that describe your content, again, so that social network can share it and display it nicely. And among those tags, the really important one is the image. That's the image that's going to be used when sharing the content. And it needs to be good, because it's really something that people are looking at. If you don't have an image, your content is not going to be shared. If you have a bad image, like your logo or something, is probably not going to work very well either. One tip here, please stop. At this time, you should probably, unless you have a very good reason to do so, you should stop using native sharing buttons, the buttons that come from the networks themselves, Facebook, Twitter, and so on, because they load a lot of JavaScript and CSS, and they are not so much CSS, lots of JavaScript. They do tracking. They require GDPR notice and stuff like that. So you probably want to avoid that, and instead use static button, just an image or just a link, and that probably is going to work well as well. One more thing, accessibility. Accessibility is a doubly useful thing. It helps people that need assistive technology, and it also works. Basically, it has the same goals as SEO work. It helps understanding content, and that's very useful to search engines as well. So work on your site accessibility, if only just because it's going to bring you more traffic, because more people are going to be able to use it. But keep in mind that it's already a ranking factor on mobile, for instance. There are things like if your buttons are too close to each other or your text is too small, that sort of thing, then it's already a ranking factor. So work on that. Now, I wanted to talk about a few things that are good to know. H1, H2. The header tags, they can be very useful for long content. Don't lose sleep over this, because they're not going to change your rankings. They're not going to make your site rank rise to the top just because you rewrote using H1, H2. If you do, it's nice, because it's useful for accessibility, and it does help search engines to understand your content. It's not as strict as you think. You can have multiple H1 on the same page. You can not have any H1. You can have only H2, H3, H4. The only thing that really matters is to keep the right ordering. So don't do H2, H4, H5, H1. That doesn't make any sense. Keep H2, H3, H4, that sort of thing. Keep things in order. Another thing, I have a lot of users who come to me asking, how do I redirect these 404s and stuff like that? So most of the time, 404 errors are fine. You don't need to do anything about it. It's not a quality factor for your SEO. The only thing that matters is to fix broken links on your site. So if you have a site here, you can use tools like Screaming Frog or for SEO, our latest extension, to find the broken links on your site. And these need fixing, not so much for SEO, because again, it's not going to hurt you, but because they are a poor experience for your visitors. So you definitely need to fix them. And the other thing is having redirect when on the 404 is actually needed only when you have a page changing URL, or a product that does not exist, but it's replaced, has an actual replacement. That's when you need to redirect. Just do not redirect all the random bots that are going to visit your site and causing errors. Lastly, I wanted to say a word about AMP, which is something that soon, when the Core Web Vital page experience update will happen in June, will not be a requirement anymore to access top stories. At the same time, you might think maybe I can get rid of AMP. At the same time, keep in mind that AMP is a very good way to pass the Core Web Vitals tests, because basically AMP was designed to pass that. It's really all about the user experience and how fast the page appears to be. So keep that in mind. It might, if you've done the work to get AMP, might be worthwhile keeping it. And now I'm getting into maybe a couple of tools that you might find useful. Obviously, you need to measure things. So analytics for me is a must. Google came up recently with a new version. Sorry. Google came up recently with a new version of their Google Analytics. It's version 4. And I want to say, do not rush on it. It actually works, and they kind of force it onto you because it's now the default. Yet there is no API to read data from it. So all the tools you might have that display analytics dashboards and things like that, they're not going to work with Analytics version 4. It's not AMP compatible. So you might want to wait a few months until they actually complete the job. And second, there's a new tool that I like very much. It's called Clarity. It's a different kind of analytics because it's a tool that does user behavior measurement. It looks at how people are clicking and traveling with their mouse through your pages. So if you want to deep dive into how users are behaving on your site, that might be very useful. It's so the real new things here. It's from Microsoft and it's free. These tools, there are already some tools like Hotjar doing that sort of thing, but they are quite expensive. And this one is free, and it will be free as far as we know. That's what they claim. So it's going to be free, and you can use it. Obviously, you might want to pay attention to user privacy when you use such tools, but yeah, it's going to be extremely useful if you're, for instance, checking on shop checkout failures and stuff like that. And another free tool that I wanted to mention is from Ahrefs, which is one of the 2 or 3 largest SEO company. They provide SEO tools to big enterprise companies. And they are one of the few having an actually useful free version, a free account. This tool is going to help you identify broken links and various SEO issues, missing meta, duplicated page title, that sort of thing. The only thing is, the one thing I find useful with them is that they give you an information on backlinks. And there are very few ways you can get information. There are very few ways you can have actual real backlinks information aside from these major tools, which are usually several $100s per month. This one will give you some limited but useful information about the backlinks to your site. It does exaggerate all the problems it finds because, hey, they want to show they are useful. So most of the problems they show are not that as bad as they make it appear. Okay, that's it for the tools. So now I wanted to not conclude because I have something else after that, but I just wanted to mention a few things that please don't do on your Joomla site. Do not redirect all the 404s to your homepage. Just do not redirect all the 404s. And if you do redirect some 404s, certainly not to your homepage. Do not spend time filling up the meta keywords. It's been more than 10 years that all major search engines don't even read meta keywords. So it's not useful, at least it's not useful for SEO. There might be some reasons to use the meta keywords. Some extensions can use them for showing related articles or stuff like that, but definitely not for SEO. So don't spend time on that. Do not fill the title and meta settings in the Joomla global configuration. And the reason for that is because if you don't have meta description or page title on some pages, then Joomla will use the global ones. And what you end up with is the same title or the same title or the same meta description on many pages. So you don't want to do that. Leave that empty. If you add a page title or if you add a meta description, add it where it belongs on each page, but not just don't use the Joomla global metadata. The one thing you don't want to do either is to block things in robots.txt. It's 2021. All search engines actually fully render the pages, so they need to have access to. I say a word about that later, but they need to have access to JavaScript and CSS and everything. If for some reason you want to have 2 or more links in your menus to the same article, there's a very useful type of menu item called aliases. It's under the system type of links. So use that instead of just making another menu item going to the same article or to the same page. Just use aliases. And last thing, one word about rel prev and rel next, which are things you might not know about, but they are tags that we added to paginated things. Paginated, so it's like a category which has page 1, page 2, page 3. We added these tags to those because it was supposed to be useful. And about 18 months ago or so, Google realized that, hey, we stopped reading these tags several years ago, so you don't need to do that. So don't remove them if you have them. They are not useful. So don't spend time adding them to new sites. That's all I'm saying. Now, a couple of things when you head back or maybe later today to check on your sites. Robots.txt just opens up everything. Leave open access to every JavaScript, images, CSS, everything. The cache folder, it needs to be opened. Many extensions cache their CSS or their JavaScript, and their CSS, mostly the CSS, is needed when search engines render the page in a browser. So they need that. Likewise, images, add dimensions for performance, core web vitals, and add alt tags because it both helps for accessibility and it helps search engines to understand what's in the image, and it will help you rank in image search, which is a really important thing these days, which I didn't touch on it, but it's really important. Do not just use the alt tags by filling it up with the file name. You know, there are some tools to do that automatically. It's useless. If you do that, don't do anything. Actually write something that describes the image content. This image, you know, you have an image of a dog walking down the street, then write image of a dog walking down the street or trotting down. I don't know what's the actual word for it. Okay, so this was my quick checklist. And to conclude, I have gathered a few resources and source of information that you might find useful. So this first piece here is about useful resources. Imagine your site is suddenly, either instead of page 1, you're on page 20, or maybe you entirely disappeared from the search results of Google. What to do? Then this page here, weebler.com/SEO/54, is going to tell you what to do when this happens. It's really a step-by-step guide, and the first step obviously is don't panic, but although you may be tempted to do so. So please take a note because that might be useful one day. Then another type of things that you might do is an SEO audit. And how do you do that? This link here youtube.com/SEO/55 is an ebook that will teach you how to do that. It's really comprehensive. It's rather simple. It's not over the top. They do ask for your email in exchange for the ebook, but it's it's up to you to decide. And lastly, the last one here /SEO/53 is a website. It's called learningseo.io, I think, and it's like the SEOpedia. It has everything about SEO. It might be a bit complicated. It's really if you want to get deep into SEO, but if you want to do that, then it's got everything for you, mostly in English though. So that's an excellent resource. And finally, SEO is always changing, and there are new things happening. So to stay in the loop, I have here selected just a handful of things you want to look at. There's a Google official search. They call that Google Search Central, and that's their official YouTube channel /SEO/56. And the good thing about it is that it's really international, so you will find their content in many languages. And they also go live. They have like office hours sessions where they take questions from people, and because this is around the world, they have it for many time zones. So it's really nice. A lot of things are happening on Twitter. If there's one person you want to follow on Twitter in terms of when it comes to SEO, it's John Mueller. It's one of the most well-known developer relationship kind of person at Google, and he's a very laid-back and very no-nonsense person, and very nice to follow. You'll always get good advice, and obviously it comes from the source, so you want to get that. Barry Schwartz is not from Google. He's a journalist. He's got a startup. But twitter.com/rustybrick, and he's always up to everything that's happening. Like you'll learn everything from him. Following him, you'll be informed of everything as it happens. He's in touch with everybody in the industry, like really being Google, the actual people doing the thing. So he's very well informed. And there are then two magazines called Search Engine Land and Search Engine Journal, and they have longer pieces with more details that what Barry Schwartz can provide. So they are very useful sources that will get a bit more details about things. Actually, Barry Schwartz writes sometimes in Search Engine Land, or often in Search Engine Land. And last, there's a podcast, single one, called Search of the Record /SEO/58. And this is podcasts from Google, and it's kind of a behind the scene thing, but it's actually not so much behind the scene. They are providing very good information about SEO, and very detailed, and it's a nice format. They try to have they try to be humorous sometimes. It's not maybe their best thing, but the thing they do best. But in terms of search, there is very valuable information there. So I encourage you, if you're into podcasts, to follow them. That's it for me. I'm very happy to answer a question now. Not sure how it works. Robin, you're back.
I'm back. Great presentation.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I put a couple of questions in here to kind of get people going. So I hope you don't mind taking mine as well. You mentioned the page speed, the different pieces of it. Do you recommend using the Lighthouse tool? Is that what you do to get your results, or are there other tools?
So Lighthouse is fine. The thing with all these tools is that you have to keep a balanced eye when you're looking at the results. There is absolutely and strictly no point in trying to get 100%, 100% there. It's just doesn't make any sense. Like 80, 90 is fine. I actually appreciate, and there's something very interesting about the core Web Vitals. Like I said, instead of being a measurement done by Google itself with their crawler, which is also something that you do when you go to PageSpeed Insight. You get, it depends on which one you're talking about, but if you're talking about Lighthouse, it's a measurement of what's happening with you. But in your context, with your computer, and even though you can trick, you can configure that a bit. Core Web Vitals is about what's happening to people on their phone in the countryside or in another country, and so on.
Okay.
So this is the basis of what they are going to use. So you have to keep that in mind, and you also have to keep in mind that it's also only a tiebreaker. So optimize for your users first, and don't lose sleep over SEO effect of the page speed, unless you're in a very competitive business, in which case this is one, and it is going to be a very important factor for you because it's so competitive. If you're the New York Times, then you have to be fast. There's no way around that. But because you're in a very competitive, other than that, Lighthouse is fine. Just keep in mind that caching is probably your best friend, and not having too many extensions, making sure you don't have 5 megabytes images being downloaded. 2 megabytes of CSS is not a very good idea. 500K of JavaScript is probably not going to work. That sort of thing. But and definitely Lighthouse is going to pinpoint this out. Just again, a shameless plug. If you use the SEO info extension that I mentioned at the start, which is free, it will give you the Core Web Vitals calculation for your the current page, and it will give you an overview of the speed, the size, and the time it took to download every piece of content on your site, including the entire page, and what was cached and what was not cached. So it's a quick overview. But Core Web Vitals is not about what's happening on your browser. It's about what's happening on everybody's browser. So it changes a bit how you look at it.
Okay. You had mentioned putting in a width for your images to, speed up, but does that affect the responsiveness of that image?
No, it does not at all. What I advise is not put the width. What I advise is put the width and height, so that browser can compute the aspect ratio. Because images are going to be displayed, restricted most of the time by not by the width that you set, but by the, let's say, for instance, you have a max width 100% or that sort of thing. So it tells the browser how wide the image can be, and it's not going to be larger than that. But if they know how wide it can be, and they can compute the aspect ratio, they can compute the height. So they already know that the image is going to be that wide and that tall. They don't have to wait for the image to load before they display it in that exact space. So no, it's going to help with your responsive images, and do it. It's nice. It's good. Do it.
Okay. And we did get a question from Victor that said, since the broadcast is very pixelated, could Yannick share some of the mentioned links? And it looks like Perio, we did get that it was weebler.com/SEO/48. So someone shared that link in the chat. So if that's correct, are you going to be providing the slides with all of?
I can. Yeah, I can. No problem. I'm very sorry that I'm actually wondering whether this is due to the closed captioning. Let's see.
Oh, I don't know.
If I deactivate that, do you see that better now?
No. So I think it wasn't the closed captions.
Okay, well.
Okay, we have a question from Andrew. What is the best way to use the relationship page to target and the relationship target to page function on links?
What's that? I will have to the relationship page to target.
And the relationship target to page function on links.
I have no idea what this is about. Relationship page to target.
I'm not sure either. Let's see, Andrew.
Can you elaborate on what's the context here? What tool you are talking about, or?
Andrew, Andrew, are you still in here? Yeah, you're in here. Okay, he's requesting come on.
Sure.
You don't care? Did he come on? Oh, there you go.
Yeah, the most basic one is like the no follow, but then there's you can do like alternates and things like that, and
okay.
And it's an option in, like, I use JCE, and there's option in the advanced. You can set one for the page and one for the target.
It's really rare. Okay, now there's feedback. Yeah, hang on.
Okay.
Is this better? Yeah, okay. So now there are very few occasions where you have to use something like that. It used to be a time where you would use things like nofollow and that sort of thing to do what's called link sculpting or page rank sculpting, where you would say these links don't follow, this link follow, and you would focus on some important links on the page and tell Google not to, or to disregard the other ones. It was supposed to put more power on some of those links that you would want to follow. But then several years ago, they stopped using that, and they stopped splitting page rank on only the follow link. They're just using all the links the same, so it doesn't matter really. So you can use no follow when you really don't want to push or put transfer your authority to other things, to some pages, because you're linking to a page that you give as a bad example or something. But it's pretty rare. Usually, I would say just follow link. As for no indexing stuff, it's pretty much the same. It's really hard to give a generic answer for that, because it's really a case-by-case basis. Likewise, alternate, all of that. It's an attempt to link to things without actually linking, and there's no point in that. Just most of the time, I would say just let them do what they do best and identify the useful pages and the not useful pages. The only exception maybe is if if you have duplicates on your site. Pages that are the same that another page, but you have a reason, whatever that is, to still keep it on the site. Then that's when you want to use a rel canonical, to say, okay, I have put this page, but this page is a duplicate of this other one, so please disregard this one. It may happen, but it's not really that common, to be honest. It should not be that common. I think that I can't think of any other reason. The alternate is usually for things like RSS feeds and stuff like that, or maybe like the AMP version, or so it's usually handled automatically. I can't think. Maybe someone will correct me, but I can't think of any good reason to use that manually on a case by case.
Okay, Andrew, you can unmute yourself if you have more to ask. I tried to unmute, but I can't. You're good? Okay, great. So another question, actually, this was one that I had, was I found that the schema that came along with the Joomla install wasn't passing, so I removed it using the overrides and added my own schema. Do you find that also to be true? Or is it because schema is always changing and we're not getting the latest schema with the install?
No, it's a good remark. The 95% of times the Joomla scheme is not going to pass, and the reason for that is that it's missing an image. It's missing an image, and the reason is that it's because it's not able to detect automatically which is, or if there is an image on the page, and whether that image is valid for the purpose. It can, I might be mistaken, but I think it can detect an image when you put an image in the intro text content, or like the intro image or the full article image. When you use that, then Joomla is able to identify that, okay, this is the image for this page. But if you don't use that, and you don't just have an image, one or more images on your text, it's not going to search the page to find the image, and therefore the image is missing. And so that's a requirement, at least for the article structured data type, the schema.org article type. You need an image is required. In addition, an image, there's a requirement on the image size. I think it's 696 pixel wide. So if you happen to have an image that's smaller than that, then it's not going to work either. So yeah, usually removing it is a good idea.
Okay.
And using a specialized extension to handle that, or doing it by hand or whatever. To be honest, Joomla is not using JSON LD, it's using microdata, and that's really hard to manage. Like using when you have overrides or stuff like that, it's really hard to manage. So it would be nice if it switched to something else.
Yeah, I tend to do things all myself, so I just go in and move it at the end, right before I launch, and put in the schema only that I want.
Most structured data extension will actually have an option to remove the Joomla schema markup.
Good. And I think the question was asked about using the menu alias, and I tend to use that a lot too. And maybe you can just tell us again where you find that and in what instances you should use it.
Okay. First, when you should use it is you should normally not use it, because the goal is that it's used when you want to have two menu items going to the same page, to the same article, or to the same category, typically to the same article. If you do that with Joomla using just simply two link of with the type single article, then Joomla will create two different URLs, because it uses the menu item aliases to build URLs. So to kind of try to fix that, which is not an ideal situation, the alias type was added. And alias is a different type of menu item that's found under the system items or system utilities or whatever, system something. And then you've got the alias type, and you can use that instead. So what you do is you do the first link, the first menu item is a direct link to your article. But if you want to add more links, more menu items to that same article, instead of using a single article menu item type, you use an alias type. And Joomla will make sure that both menu items will use the same URL. Now, why you would want to do that is left to you, but usually it's a rare occasion. But if it happens, then you want to try to avoid having multiple URLs to the same content. That's the point here.
Okay, so maybe you would be setting up two types of menus. You have your main menu, and then maybe on a secondary page you might just have like a couple of links in the right column, and when you're setting up that menu, and make sure you don't link somewhere that you've already created. You want to make sure you make a alias to the main menu item, especially if it's exactly the same.
To be honest, actually, I think I used it also when you have like a mobile menu, and that's different, maybe slightly different from your regular desktop menu. So yeah, that's another option. So it's rare, and it's not major if you don't use that. You can have two URLs. That's one of the cases where you might want to use a canonical instead, but it's probably simpler to use an alias menu item type.
So I think we've answered all of the questions in the chat. And actually, we are right on time. We're 1 minute away from the end. If anyone wants to reach out to Yannick directly, you can message him directly. You can have a great day, everyone.